Bitch! I have the house to myself, a game on the big screen, 2 cold beers and more in the mini fridge next to my favorite chair, and someone is calling. This better not be one of those asshole sales calls or robocalls. It was around 8 p.m. on Wednesday. My wife Tracy often worked late on Wednesdays, and I always made plans for a fun and relaxing evening. Today was special. I got a meatball pizza from Papa John's, grabbed a couple beers, then turned on the Cubs game and started relaxing with my favorite drink. I had 2 more bottles in the small refrigerator next to me, and 6 more in the kitchen refrigerator. It should be a good evening. My wife came around 10, took a quick shower, and by about 11 we went to bed. Wednesday was a quiet night at the Avondales. However, this phone call was to ruin my pleasure. I just knew it. But being the responsible guy that I am, I answered it anyway. It turns out it was Sherry Tremaine, wife of Tracy's boss, Jacques, who was practically hysterical. It appears Jacques had a heart attack while working with Tracy, my wife, who called 911 and was rushed to the hospital by paramedics in poor condition. Sherry told me that Tracy had gone with Jacques in the ambulance and would need to be taken home since Sherry intended to stay as long as Jacques needed her. I told her I was on my way and wished Jacques all the best. Jacques was Tracy's boss for 22 years. She started working at his software company right after college and was now his right-hand woman, so to speak, as well as his work wife. I had already met Tracy when she went to work for Jacques, and over the years our families would often do things together. He seemed like a nice guy. Tracy said he was an amazing boss, and he also took good care of Tracy in the payroll department. Jacques, a French citizen, is 10 years older than Tracy and I at 55. He's a good-looking guy who works out and has a decent body for a guy his age. He is a dynamic personality, the center of attention in the crowd. Both men and women are drawn to him. I understand that God has a plan for all of us, no matter how well we take care of ourselves. But I must admit that I was surprised that Jacques had a heart attack. I parked my car in the visitor's parking lot next to the emergency room, walked in, and asked about Jacques. I told the nurse at the counter that I was the husband of the woman who arrived with him, and I was looking for her too. As I said this, I noticed a couple of EMTs to my right. One gently patted the other on the forearm and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Cook is here." I wonder what's going to happen. Although he was looking in my direction, I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know what a cook was and didn't really care about it. I was just looking for Tracy. 5 minutes later, Tracy and Sherry left the room, tears streaming down their faces. They noticed me and walked towards me, and we shared a group hug. "He's dead, Rick!" Tracy wailed, barely audible as we embraced. "He died a few minutes ago." The doctor said it was a massive heart attack. I was stunned by the silence as the 3 of us hugged in the hallway, both women sobbing loudly. Sherry, also a French citizen, was married to Jacques for 35 years. They married when they were both 20 and came to this country when Jacques took a job with an American software company at the dawn of the computer age. They have a daughter, AITA, who is 3 years older than my daughter Allison, who is 18, and the girls are so similar they could be sisters. Jacques treasured AITA. This will be very difficult for her, I thought to myself. Just then, one of the EMTs came up to me and asked if I was Tracy's husband. I said yes, and he handed me Tracy's purse, saying that she had left it in the ambulance when they arrived at the hospital. I separated myself from the crying women and, taking the purse in my left hand, thanked him and shook his right hand with mine. I then began wrapping the dangling strap around the purse to get it out of the way when I thought I saw a bra tucked into the middle compartment. It didn't make any sense to me, so I took another look and sure enough, there was a bra in the purse. It was so crazy when the women left the room crying that I never got a good look at Tracy. I noticed that she was, indeed, not wearing a bra. This is weird, I thought to myself. I don't know how long we stayed in the hospital with Sherry before she decided she needed to leave. Amy was getting ready to return from university in the morning, and Sherry decided that she needed to get some sleep. I dropped Sherry off at her house and then drove Tracy and I to our house. I thought I could help both women get their cars tomorrow. Sherry from the emergency room lot and Tracy from the work lot. Tracy didn't say a word to me as we walked through the door, heading straight to the master bathroom and getting into the shower. She joined me in the living room about 20 minutes later, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She sat down on the couch and I climbed out of my chair and joined her, pulling her towards me for a tight hug. She was breathing raggedly, and I could feel her body shaking with sobs. I wanted to ask her about why she wasn't wearing a bra, given that she was supposed to be working with Jacques. But I didn't have the guts to do it at that moment. Instead, I held her quietly for another 20 minutes until she said she was tired and was going to bed. It was midnight, so I decided to go to bed with her. The next morning, after showering and shaving, I offered to take Tracy to the office to pick up the car. She suddenly looked like she had been punched in the gut and began to stutter before taking a moment to catch her breath and calm down. Instead, she asked me to take her to Sherry's, and they would take a taxi to the office and pick up some of Jacques' things. Tracy will then take Sherry to the hospital to fill out some paperwork and pick up Jacques' personal belongings. I offered my help, but was quickly rejected. This actually worked quite well for me. I needed to find the EMTs who worked last night and get some answers. After dropping Tracy off at Sherry's and getting a quick update on how she was doing, I hopped back in the car and drove straight to the hospital. I quickly managed to find out the names of the emergency doctors who brought Jacques yesterday, and they told me where to find them. I found my targets on the fire escape where I was directed, and they remembered me from the night before. I looked at the person who handed me Tracy's purse. His name tag said his name was Rob, and asked him point blank where the race started. What do you mean? He asked, suddenly looking at me with suspicion. My wife and Jacques were supposed to be working, but you didn't take them to Softel, did you? Isn't that why you called me Cook? Oh shit. Jesus, buddy. I didn't mean anything personal, he said, raising his voice. We've just seen enough of these cases where the two people checking into a room aren't husband and wife, and when the shit hits the fan, we're the bad guys. Don't shoot the damn messenger. Calm down, Rob. I'm not trying to blame you for anything. I'm just trying to get to the truth. I had to look up the meaning of cook, and didn't like what I saw, but I don't think that's your problem. Obviously, it's my problem if you tell me you picked them up somewhere other than Softel. We picked them up at the West Seed Hotel, Rob answered. I think they were doing this for about 15 minutes when the guy just grabbed his chest and collapsed on top of your wife. She actually had to push him away from her to get to the phony and call 911, and then she gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He was barely alive when we took him to the emergency room. I had the truth. I didn't need more. I thanked them both and left. I felt them looking at me with pity in their eyes as I left. While I was driving home, my head was spinning. Tracy was having sex with Jacques when he suffered a heart attack. I wonder how long this went on, I thought. Then it hit me. Actually, it hit me like a thunderbolt. Our daughter Allison and their daughter Amy were not just a coincidence. They were sisters. Tracy had sex with him for at least 19 years. How could I not have noticed this before? What a fucking gullible idiot I was. She and Jacques worked late at least once a week, sometimes twice, and then had the occasional bachelorette party or party. Was she really sleeping with him all this time? What about the business trips they took together? How could Sherry not know? I admit I can be an ignorant bastard sometimes. But how can a woman be so ignorant, especially when the girls look so much alike? And Sherry was in the office often, Tracy said, popping in at any time just to say hello to her husband, or her. I thought they were good friends from the way it looked. How could Tracy do this to Sherry? Tracy's car was in the garage when I got home. She was sitting in the living room drinking wine from a glass when I entered. Apparently, the look on my face told her I was unhappy. What happened, dear? She asked. Although I wanted to act calmly, my anger took over, and I could not control myself. How long did you have sex with Jacques? I blurted out, venom dripping from my voice as I turned up the volume. He's Allison's father, isn't he? Tracy dropped her wine glass as she jumped up from the couch. How How could you tell me such terrible things? She screamed, practically attacking me. She stopped about a foot away from me, eyes blazing like lasers, and if looks could kill, I would have been dead on the spot. I wasn't going to back down. I was right, and I knew it. I stood my ground, looking intently into those eyes. But I lowered the volume, almost to a whisper, when I hissed, "Tell me to kiss your ass, but don't you dare lie to me and tell me I'm wrong. I'll ram your fucking teeth down your throat if you lie to me." Never before in the 20 years of our marriage and our relationship before this have I yelled at my wife, let alone threatened to physically harm her. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. Her mouth opened as if she was about to lie, but then apparently she realized that I was serious, and the lie stuck in her throat. She also quickly jumped away from me. Maybe it was the flames coming out of my eyes. "You killed him, you know?" I told her as she sat back down on the sofa, ignoring the spilled wine on the carpet. The stress of the deception combined with the physical activity was probably too much for his heart. "I'm surprised this didn't happen sooner considering how long you two have been having sex." From the stricken expression on her face, I knew I had struck a nerve. She looked down at her hands and fidgeted for what seemed like minutes, but in reality it was probably only 10 seconds. "Oh my God, do you think I really killed him?" she asked quietly. "I wonder if Sherry thinks so too." "Why would Sherry think that way? Unless she knew about you two." "Did she know about you two?" "She knew, and approved of it almost from the very beginning," Tracy said quietly. "Sometimes she even joined us, especially when she went on business trips with us. She always told me that she thought it was right that I should enjoy Jacques because I was such an important part of his success in business. And she was glad that I took care of him in the office while she took good care of him at home." It was my turn to sit down. I felt dizzy and confused. So I was the only one who didn't know? What about Allison? Allison has known about this for the last 4 years. She handles it well. Oh shit. Allison knows and she's good at it. God. I howled. That's not really what I meant. Does Sherry know that Allison is Jacques' daughter? Sherry knows and she's okay with it. Amy knows too. Well, I realize you've all had a good laugh at stupid old Rick's expense many times. Even my daughter, his daughter, I suppose, knew and didn't tell me. Damn wonderful. I ran out of the house. I ended up going to a local park and just sat there for a couple of hours staring into space. Tracy called my cell phone a couple of times, but I let the calls go to voicemail. I just sat and thought. I always considered myself a smart guy, but when it came to Tracy, I was a complete dumbass. It never occurred to me that she was cheating on me, and I trusted her so completely that I probably missed a bunch of semi-obvious signs. At least for 19 years. So damn ignorant. I wondered if there was anyone else besides Jacques. A whirlwind of thoughts raged in my brain. I left the park when it started to get dark and drove home. When I entered the house from the garage, I saw Tracy sitting in her usual place with a cup of tea in front of her. She offered me a cup, but I declined and went to my wine cabinet for something stronger. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat down in the chair opposite her. "I can't even begin to tell you how sorry I am for hurting you," Tracy said quietly, looking at her hands. "I need to know the whole story. Now," I said, and there was more than a little irritation in my voice. "You have to tell me how you could do this to me while saying you love me. You have to tell me if you ever really loved me, and if you respected me. Don't you dare doubt my love for you. Never!" Tracy shouted with urgency in her voice. "I always loved you. I still love you. I just loved Jacques. Some people think that you can only love one person, but I know that is not true because I have loved two. Don't spare me. Continue," I said decisively. Tracy joined Softel when the company was about a year old. As in many small companies, employees worked long hours and became emotionally close. It was an exciting time for her, and I remembered her telling me about the difficulties during our dates. We dated for about a year when she joined the company. As the company became successful and grew, Tracy became Jacques' right-hand man, so to speak. He was a dynamic leader, and the face of the company. She was essentially the glue that held everything together, She excelled at many tasks, and Jacques came to depend on her as his other half. At the same time that things were heating up between Tracy and I outside the office, things were heating up between Jacques and Tracy in the office. She noted that it was almost as if her personal and work lives ran parallel. Although Tracy and Jacques were respectable in front of the rest of the office, she continued, away from the others, they became even more affectionate, discussing everything from soup to nuts, from sex to politics. She was 24 years old, beautiful, with an athletic build and long blonde hair. He was 34 years old, a well-built man with long wavy brown hair, a sweet smile, and an almost old-fashioned politeness. Tracy remembered how it had felt almost natural the first time they had made love on the leather couch in his office at the end of a long day. Because it seemed so natural, Tracy said she never felt guilty about sleeping with both me and Jacques, even when she and I got married a year later. It wasn't lust, it was a complete love affair, similar, but at the same time, different from the one she and I had. But she knew she could never tell me because of how I felt about infidelity. She loved us both and wanted it to continue. Although I was not told about the affair, Jacques told Sherry about 2 months later. When he and Tracy realized their romance would be long-lasting, he wanted to be completely honest with his wife, who had just given birth to their first child. Sherry and Amy will always have the biggest place in his heart, Tracy said. Jacques told Sherry. But he wanted to keep a piece of his heart for Tracy. Then Sherry invited Tracy to spend the weekend with Jacques and her. I remembered how she went away for the weekend under the pretext of her mother's illness, and after that weekend she gave her blessing to the affair. When Tracy became pregnant several years later, it was Sherry who took the troubled Tracy into her heart, and it was she who decided how the narrative would unfold if the baby was indeed Jacques'. Since Jacques and I both had A+ blood, that solved the easy part. And since I was almost never around both girls together alone, when someone noticed the girls' similarities, Sherry or Tracy almost always made some witty remark. Both women knew that if I had a chance to think about it, I might become suspicious. Sherry looked at Tracy almost like a little sister and was actually proud of Jacques' second family, Tracy noted. I sat dumbfounded during Tracy's confession, no, memory actually, as she in no way expressed regret for what she had done. She was simply recalling the events. Tracy paused and looked at me as if she expected me to say something. The only thing I could think of at that moment was to ask if he and Jacques took a break when we first got married and had sex almost every day of the week. She looked confused and looked away before finally answering, no. It was such an exciting time in my life. I had 2 handsome men loving me and wanting me, and I was extremely horny all the time, she said. In those days when Jacques and I made love, I always tried hard, wash yourself down there in case we were going to have sex too. Yes, sometimes you had sloppy seconds, but I tried to keep them to a minimum, and I never allowed you to caress my private part after Jacques and I made love. Terribly tactful of you, I muttered. The funny thing is, after all these years, I never really compared the two of you sexually, she continued. You were both good lovers, kind and considerate, and about the same height. It wasn't the best sex with Jacques, just different because of who each of you was. I have to admit, I was somewhat comforted by the fact that it wasn't just lust with a big dorky stranger, but at the same time I was stung to the core by her confession that she loved him as much as she loved me. I was raised to believe in one partner, one soulmate for each of us. And while I may have been the one receiving most of her intimacy, there was another one I was sharing with. Tracy set down her tea and looked into my eyes, trying to look into my soul. I had no answer to her unasked question, and I had no words of wisdom. I put the bottle in the closet, put the glass in the sink, and headed upstairs to bed. I knew without a doubt that I would not be able to sleep that night.